everyone, I hope y'all are having a great day, and today I'll be reviewing The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. But first, let me tell you a little story. There once was this girl who had a list of so many books to read, and at the top of that list, heavy with the burden of priority, were her AP review books and her SAT subject test guides. And because she knew she had to read those, she ended up neglecting the books she normally read for fun. But then one day, she was notified on Twitter by a reviewer she greatly admired, and the tweet simply said, "You should read The Raven Boys. Trust me." And trust she did. She immediately abandoned her review books that she admittedly had not touched to begin with and picked up The Raven Boys. And although she felt guilty every minute she spent reading it and not studying for something, because there's always something to study for, she completed the book and was indebted to the reviewer forever for suggesting her to read this awesome book. The end. So, in summary, I shouldn't be reading fun books because of all the academic related books, for like college and the future and stuff. But apparently when Jenny recommends a book, I take it very seriously. Jenny from Jellify, by the way. She's awesome. Subscribe. So, The Raven Boys. Let's talk about it. I went into this book knowing very, very little about it. Basically nothing. And I think that's for the best. Even the Goodreads Summary is super misleading, I thought, because it led me to believe that this book was going to be a romance, which it really wasn't. The romance in the first book is pretty insignificant. It's like nothing compared to the other things that are going on in the book. This book is about a quest and psychics and really great interpersonal relationships, and that's all I want to say. This book really surprised me, and I want it to surprise you too. I like The Raven Boys a lot. At this point, I've actually read its sequel, The Dream Thieves, as well, and I thought The Dream Thieves was better, but that's only because I thought The Dream Thieves was so utterly fantastic. The Raven Boys on its own is wonderful too. The characters of the Raven Boys are so fantastic. You really get the sense that Maggie Stiefvater knows each and every one of her characters very deeply and very personally, even if you don't get to see all of their layers in the first book. And each character, no matter who they're allied with or what their intention is so easy to fall in love with. If you're not completely in love with every single one of the Raven Boys and Blue, who's our protagonist, by the end of book 1, which I personally wasn't, by the end of The Dream Thieves, I swear you will be. The characters are just so complex and so unique. They each have like their distinct flavor and their characteristic quirks, and they feel so real. The fact that the characters feel so real is particularly interesting because the atmosphere of the book definitely doesn't feel real. This book is a fantasy-ish, paranormal-ish blend, and the tone of the novel is so suspenseful and dreamlike. And the atmosphere is just created so effortlessly, which is super impressive on Maggie Stiefvater's part. The setting also feels incredibly real. It's set in a small town called Henrietta, and everything is just painted so vividly in my mind while I'm reading. It's like involuntary imagery. The plot is slow for the most part. You can definitely sense that Maggie Stiefvater is slowly pulling pieces together one at a time to create her bigger picture, and the slowness of this book combined with the mysterious, suspenseful feel of it made me so antsy while reading. I very nearly Googled spoilers because I wanted to know how it ended, but I restrained myself. I told myself that the storyline was so intricate that it would be a tragic disservice to Maggie Stiefvater if I spoiled myself. And I think that's definitely true. The story is just so complex. There are lots of threads weaving and working together, and it's so interesting to read about. Also, there are quite a few shocks in the story, but if you read really carefully, then you'll probably see them coming. Sometimes Maggie drops these blatant hints, and naturally I didn't register them for their true meaning, so I was surprised at some events, but maybe that won't be the case for you. Maybe you're a different kind of reader than I am. I don't think The Raven Boys was a perfect book. I think the characterization of everyone wasn't quite as keen as it could have been, especially comparing it to The Dream Thief. I think the plot could have been a tad faster, although I wasn't really put off by the pace that it was. There are probably other things to critique, but overall, The Raven Boys is a solidly enjoyable book. And it leads to an even better sequel, in my opinion. So I'm going to go into a quick spoiler section now, so if you haven't read The Raven Boys, please go read it, leave, come back once you've read it because I don't want you to be spoiled. So goodbye. Okay, wow, let's see. What do I remember? Oh, I remember being so drastically shocked when we learned that Noah was dead the whole time. When I read that, my body was literally chilled. I had goosebumps, my legs felt a little numb, I was just a mess. And like Jenny said in her review, it really shouldn't have been a surprise because Noah literally says that he's dead earlier in the book, but when everything in a book is so magical, it's just so easy to take everything as a metaphor or hyperbole or something. I just naturally don't take things literally. I remember dying at the ending because Ronan could pull things out of his dream. And I didn't have the dream thieves immediately with me, and I was just freaking out. Even if Ronan had explicitly said, chainsaw is something I pulled from my dreams, I still wouldn't have taken it literally. I would never have guessed that it was literally from his dreams. Anyways, I went into this book thinking that Blue and Gansey were going to have a romance, which they didn't, and I was caught pretty off guard. Instead, Blue had a romance with Adam, which is funny because in the very beginning of the book, when we're first being introduced to each of the Raven boys, I remember distinctly thinking that Adam was my favorite. I really liked Adam, and I was like, why couldn't have Adam been the love interest? And then he was. And then gradually, I got annoyed with him, and I didn't really like him as a love interest anymore. This is going to be a pretty unpopular opinion, but I didn't really find Gansey all that charming in the Raven boys. I liked him as a character, and I really liked how different he was, how he didn't really fit into any of the stereotypes, but I didn't particularly like him as a person or as a potential love interest. Unpopular opinion, I know, don't hate me. By the end of the book, I remember thinking that Ronan was my favorite Raven boy. I loved him a lot. I loved how mysterious he was. I loved how hard he was on the outside, how he just gives off this sense that he's simultaneously poisonous and poisoned. I loved each of the Raven boys. I don't know if I loved them at the end of book 1, but at this point, after reading The Dream Thieves, I am in love with each of them. And perhaps more than that, I love them together. I love their relationships with one another, how they interact, like their motion as a unit. I love that. I love that so much. They kind of gave me like an F4 vibe at the beginning, if anyone's a Boys Over Flowers fan. When Adam went to wake the ley line by himself, I was so infuriated. Where the heck is the logic in that decision, Adam? Huh? What makes you think you can do it on your own? What makes you think that's a good idea? What makes you think that Gansey, your best friend, would be okay with that? I was so angry at Adam for being so stupid and irrational. But anyway, he ended up making a sacrifice to wake the ley line, and that sacrifice changes him, and I'm kind of scared. I'm actually really scared of how that's gonna change him. I'm scared that it's gonna really transform his character in the next books. I'm not looking forward to that. Oh, and I also want to quickly mention Neve because I was so unsure about her throughout the entire book. I didn't know how trustworthy she was, so I was skeptical. And then at the end of the book, she disappeared, and I was so confused. I'm still kind of unsure as to what went down. That was weird. I'm sure it'll play into the future books, but what? Ooh, I also want to mention that dream tree in Cabeswater where they all like stood in the hollow and they each received a vision. I'm so curious as to what that vision is, what it implies, whether it's set in stone that it happens in the future and it's going to happen regardless of anything they do to change it, or what? Like, what is it? Like, Adam saw Gansey dying and Ronan like blaming him for it, and that tears me apart. And Blue, she saw Gansey asking to be kissed even though he knew that it would probably mean his death. What? And Gansey saw that he was Glendower? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, just bear with me. But what? What are these visions? I need to know. In the beginning of the book, when Gansey is found on the Spirit Road, that means that he was going to die within 12 months. But then one of the women that Blue lives with, I think it might have been Neve, but I'm not sure, said that she didn't really see him die. She just saw him disappear. I'm so curious as to what that means. Does that mean Gansey isn't actually going to die? Does that mean that maybe he's like going to go back in time or go into the future, since like time is a circular thing? Is he going to suddenly turn into Glendower? What? I don't know. I'm just confused. I just have so many questions and I can barely handle waiting for the answers. The Raven Boys is a great book. I liked it a lot. Thanks, Jenny, for recommending this book to me. But also, what have you done? The only thing I think about nowadays is the Raven Boys. It's ruining my life. Anyway, that's it for me. Please let me know your thoughts on the Raven Boys. Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Please don't leave any spoilers if you've already read Blue Lily Lily Blue. Which reminds me, I'm not a really big fan of the name Blue unless it belongs to the Queen's daughter, aka Blue Ivy. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day and happy reading. Goodbye!